KFUG Community Radio, 1028 the time. Paul Kurtz with you on this and Community Service, the show. I've got Mike and Persephone at microphones, and we are joined live in the studio, Pastor Dana Gill Port from the United Methodist Church in Crescent City. How you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing well.
Got nothing. I got nothing. Hold on.
Uh-oh.
There you go. There you are.
Awesome.
I didn't push all the buttons.
I hate it when that happens. I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
It's nice. It's nice. It's a good time. I'm having a good time. I'm enjoying the rain, actually. I really like this.
Oh, good.
Yeah, that's what
I don't.
Everybody's like, oh, that's nice for you. So let's dive. Well, we won't dive right in. Let's get in with it. How's Otis doing? How's your boy?
Oh man, he's good. He's dancing all the time and talking and keeping me busy.
He seems very, very like adventurous. Like there's no fear.
No.
Yeah.
He's been jumping off of 2-foot window sills since he was 10 months old.
Yes, exactly. That's
armed with a drill.
Yeah, armed with a drill.
So, clue us in. We were even talking a little bit. There are reasons you're here and sharing, but I get the and you'd set this up with Mike, but I get the impression this was like just kind of a catch-all, kind of catching up. You know, how are things in your life and in your profession, in your job, in being a person of God in front of a congregation here in the times of COVID and Del Norte? How's it all going?
It's hard. It is so hard. I don't think most of the people who attend congregations, and even obviously the people who don't, really see the amount of work that goes behind the scenes, and I'll speak momentarily in broad strokes. The majority of churches in the United States, when we think of churches, we think of the big mega churches with the evangelical, where they have like a lot of funding and a lot of staff. And the reality is that the majority of churches, and we see it here too, is that is not the case. Most of the churches are rural with one pastor, and that one pastor being the only staff, unless they're lucky enough to get an accompanist, right?
Right.
Which we are, thankfully. And so pastors end up doing pastoral care. We end up being the janitor. We end up doing all of the admin work. And then, I'm struggling during the pandemic, just like everyone else is, while I'm trying to do all of this other stuff. So it's like, and I think a lot of people forget that. Like, I have my own set of stressors going on in my personal life outside of my professional life. And they're like, well, what do you do with your day? And it's like, I spent all day cleaning and disinfecting the church after the church service. That was one day. Another day, it takes me a full day or two to prepare for Sunday worship, both administratively and getting the sermon prepared. And I have to come up with the order of worship, and then we have copyright on top of all of that. So I have to worry about copyright issues when we're live streaming. Like, the pandemic has made things a lot more difficult in a lot of ways. Yeah.
And I also know this because my folks are part of your congregation too. That you're also having to deal with a leaky church.
Oh gosh, and I just showed up at the church before I came over here to go into the office and check on things, which is like the one place that we haven't had any issues.
In the office in the back there, and
the window is leaking, and all of our electronics are wet now.
Oh man!
So I'm so frustrated with our annex. It's leaky. It's a money pit. It's sucking all of our money and our energy. I'm so tired of it.
Yeah.
Our sanctuary is the one piece of our property that is not draining emotionally.
It's not draining emotionally. Now, you talked about originally like a kind of looking at all of this in terms of the Great Resignation, right? I mean, talking about how, I guess this is something I was just reading while you got here. I was catching up on the Great Resignation and looking at people who are changing, and especially, and this is something I don't know if a lot of people understand. They probably hear it in your voice, but you're not like an old pastor. You're not everybody remembers previous pastors from the United Methodist Church and stuff. How in your 30s, you're a young mother, and that's, you're part of the demographic that has been changing their jobs and kind of like saying, I'm done with this and capitalism, and I want to refashion my life and all. Do you feel those same sorts of pressures?
Oh yeah, I think especially since mostly since the pandemic hit, I will say, I have thought about quitting my job almost on a daily basis.
Wow.
And I think one of the big things is that being clergy, at least in the United Methodist tradition, but across the board, clergy, it's traditionally a men's role, and it's typically a role for old white men, right? Like that's what we think of when we think of a what's the word? Mainstream Protestant pastor.
Yeah.
Mainline, that was the word I was looking for. And then with those old white male pastors came the pastor's wife. And she would fill in the duties of janitor, cooking meals for people in need, right? So I am now coming in as a young woman, expected to fill 2 roles because my husband is not going to play the role of pastor's wife. He's got a job.
That's interesting.
And so really we have this role that's been built in a system of patriarchy.
I have never thought of that. I'm sorry to interrupt, but
no,
so
that's okay.
Is that for women pastors then? Is that like a common thing? You end up doing both jobs like that? I hadn't even thought about that.
Yeah, if you get a male pastor, it is the general expectation that their wife will not have a job. She will be a homekeeper, a homemaker, and support her husband and all that he does in ministry, and even do more in ministry. Like it's a full-time job to be the pastor's wife. Wow. They call it being the first lady.
Sure.
And it's so now if you're a female, you have to do 2 jobs, or if you're a male and you have a partner who works, you're doing 2 jobs for the price of one. And man, we get paid minimum wage. We do not. I get a $5,000 stipend for my health insurance. Like that's all I get. We are not making a ton of money. We do it because we love it, because we're committed to serving God. And I know a lot of my friends went into it for the same reasons I did, generally speaking, not specifically. So I feel comfortable speaking for more than just myself. But like we go into ministry because we believe that we can create communities where we become the good news of Jesus Christ and live out the good news of Jesus Christ, rather than just passively receiving it, right? And that's part of the struggle of the Great Resignation, is we're seeing so many people, after decades of, very bluntly putting it, white male pastors. I lost my train of thought. Thank you, Hashimoto's.
Well, let me just jump in then for a moment, because just to put it in context, when we're talking about this thing, the Great Resignation, this is something that has hit our economy and our society in a very, very broad and profound way. Something like 3%, I think, of working people all across all types of professions, but a lot of working class service workers and other people have just said the heck with it. And it just said, you know what, I'm not going to do this anymore. If this is the best I can get, I'm out of here. Some of them have been older workers who have retired, but many of them have just said the conditions of this job, the amount of money I'm being paid to do it, simply does not do it for me anymore. A lot of this spurred on by, having to cope with the pandemic and all this. So this is a big economical and sociological
it's a shift
that has happened in our country, and this is part of it. I wanted to ask you something though, Dana, because I think another thing is that particularly people of my generation, there was a lot more stability when it came to employment. There were a lot more benefits. I mean, I for a lot of reasons didn't do any of that, right? But that's a different story.
You heard about it.
But right. And so, and all of that stuff has been eroded in one way or another, and all of the various social supports that were built into society for people in my generation, those are all gone now.
Right. Like collective bargaining doesn't happen much anymore. Unions are a thing of the past, right?
Pensions are
pensions are dwindling. And quite frankly, a lot of people in my generation and younger we're tired of playing the capitalist game because it only benefits very few.
Right, yeah.
It's not worth it. And when you put us in this crucible of a pandemic and we're forced to choose between the health and safety of our family and paying the man, we're going to choose health and safety of our family.
Go ahead, Mike.
No, I was just going to say, and the pandemic.
That's where I was going.
For people of, someone of your age, well, I mean, obviously for everybody, but even more so for younger people, comes on the heels of the 2008 financial meltdown, and so many people under crushing student debt and all of that. So all of these things are just coming together and mounting up to put a tremendous amount of pressure on people, particularly younger people, particularly younger working people, I think.
Sure. And I was reading too that one of the sectors that has experienced the highest rates of resignation, of job change, of people just leaving, are healthcare workers, which seems, if not directly applicable to you, then certainly adjacent to you. Would you consider yourself a healthcare worker in that regard?
I mean, if you had asked me before the pandemic, I would have said no.
Really, yeah.
But at this point, I think what we're realizing from the pandemic is that our spiritual health is directly tied to our social health and our physical health. And our social health has been directly affected by the pandemic, obviously. I don't need to go into that one.
Yeah.
But it's taken a toll on our mental health. It's taken a toll on some of our physical health, a lot of our physical health. I don't know if health is the right word, but
sure,
we'll go with it. And I don't know, like, at this point, I almost would, because your spiritual vitality, we were talking about this a little bit before we went on the air, like, my mental health is directly related to my physical health and my spiritual health. And when I start to get stressed or start to get depressed and feel a depressive episode come on, like, the things that keep me spiritually sane and grounded and connected to God, and the things that keep me mentally sane, which are often the same things, are the first things to go out the window.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, like, my prayer life is the first thing to suffer when I start to get depressed. And I think that we're starting to realize that our spiritual health is directly tied to both our physical and mental health.
And I think also you could term, I mean, we were talking about essential workers, and just the way that churches sort of became this, I don't know, battleground, but a place where we really had to come to terms with the impacts of the pandemic. That just sort of highlighted the fact that for much of this nation, people of God are essential workers, that they were willing to stand up and to fight and to make a big deal out of the fact that they couldn't worship. You couldn't worship in person.
Right. Yeah, and because that's a huge part of our faith. Like, yes, you can worship God in private. Yes, you can do that. And so much of our faith, at least the Christian faith, I can't speak to other faiths, right? Is the communal aspect of our public,
right?
It's fellowship.
Yeah.
Because where two or more are present, God is there also.
Yeah.
God is in the in-between space, in that liminal space.
And you haven't been told what to say as far as when Zoom is involved in that? When two or more are present online?
No. I did have someone try and tell me. I took it with a grain of salt. He tried to tell us that God was not present in Zoom calls. And I was like, I disagree, sir. I disagree.
Well, it's interesting because I had a long career in doing working in drug rehab programs, running drug rehab programs. And there was a fellow who was quite famous in that realm, a guy named John Bradshaw. And he said an interesting thing once, among many interesting things, was he says, you can't hope alone. That it's virtually, if not literally, impossible to hope when you're like isolated and alone. And I think the term spiritual or spirituality gets thrown around a lot, and I think it means different things to different people. But if you just sort of say your sense of like purpose and place and all of that, and once that begins to be eroded, then it's no wonder that people start getting sick, both mentally and physically, because you have nothing to bolster against those constant assaults, you know?
Yeah.
And people are fatigued. They are tired, right? Like we're seeing this across the board. They're done with mask wearing. They are done with social distancing. Like they don't care what the consequences are anymore at this point to a certain degree.
Yeah. I also think societally we lack the wherewithal this time around to shut things down and deal with it.
Yeah.
Right. Well, it's when you're burnt out and you've run out of coping mechanisms. It's hard to continue on. Which is, for me personally, why I'm so grateful that I have faith, because it is only because of my faith that I've been able to not get so frustrated and give up and say, I'm quitting, I'm done with this.
What have been like the particular sort of stresses and worries and things you've had to deal with as far as holding a congregation physically together during the pandemic? I know that, we broadcast a previous week's online stream from the United Methodist Church every Sunday at 11, and then you've got 12:30 are when the services happen, and I hear how many people are actually there present in that. How difficult has that been?
It's been hard. A lot of people are still worshiping from home virtually. And the people who are in person don't see that. And so then they're like, they start to spiral and they're like, our church is closing, right? There's no one here worshiping anymore, which is not true. Yes, numbers are down, but that's churches across the board, everywhere. Yeah. And then there's like when we were just virtual, I think that was the hardest part, because there were so many people in the congregation who couldn't get online or just didn't have the mental energy to learn how to do Zoom worship or Facebook Live worship. And that was the hardest part, because it was those people and then the people who are musically inclined that I feel have suffered the most, because singing was taken away, right? And so people who are fed by singing their praises to God were like, well, what do I do now? How do I fill my soul now? And like, so you end up as a pastor during the pandemic, you become this emergency services person, spiritual care, palliative care, and then also like you end up having to entertain them almost to try and keep them together. So you're like doing a little song and dance, and it's exhausting to be a little tap dancing monkey on stage every week.
Well, and I want to get to that, but for those people who don't know what palliative care is, can you explain that a little bit more?
Making people comfortable. Palliative care is like when, I mean, in the medical industry, it's when there's not much left that we can do.
It's
except
like a hospice sort of thing would be palliative
essentially
care.
Hospice. Yeah. But there's not necessarily death anywhere near in sight.
Yeah.
And we've been doing a lot of spiritual palliative care, trying to get people comfortable and get their souls nurtured and filled, when for so long they only knew one way of having their souls nurtured and filled. And so it's like, hey, guess what, we gotta figure out a new way to worship God together, and that's uncomfortable for people. Not only is it new and uncomfortable, but it doesn't necessarily fill them immediately, because it's new and it's the familiar that has us feel the warm fuzzies,
that sense of groundedness. We're speaking with Pastor Dana Gill Port of Crescent City's United Methodist Church, and you are tuned to KFUG, Crescent City, California. So how did you phrase it? Dancing monkey?
Yeah.
Right. Well, no. So the reason, because there's something in this piece that you shared on Facebook, which really spurred me to contact you, and that is the dying condition, my words, not necessarily yours, but the dying condition of the institutional church. And how much, because like Joel Osteen, he's sitting around counting his money and going out and buying Maseratis for cash.
Right.
That's a different thing.
He's Scrooge McDuck swimming in his piles of money.
Right. Which is not the case for the vast majority of churches, as you stated. does it come to the point sometimes where it feels like, performing monkey in order to try to keep enough money coming in the place to keep the doors open?
Yeah, that's one of the biggest things in churches across the board, right? Is, and we talk about it in seminary when we're training to be pastors, is there are always, you have like 2 or 3 people in your church, generally speaking, that give the most money. Like they're the primary givers. And man, if you don't give sermons that entertain them, if you preach or speak something that is contrary to what makes them comfortable or what they believe to be true, they pull their funding, right? And that is terrifying for a pastor, because then you're like, I'm failing at my job because our bosses are the only thing that they care about. Well, that's not true. Not the only thing. It seems sometimes that the only thing that they care about is the money that we're bringing in and the butts in the seats. And so when your biggest donors are like, I don't like what you preached on Sunday, I'm not giving my money anymore, that's a terrifying thing to come to reckon with, right? And so if you're not careful, it can feel a little bit like you end up becoming a dancing monkey to appease the few donors. And I think that I did that for a little bit, and then I stopped caring because it's so exhausting, and in my opinion, antithetical to the gospel of Jesus Christ. Like, we are not here to pander to money and kowtow to, well, if you don't preach things that make me feel good and back up what I'm doing and how I'm acting, I'm not gonna, like, I don't care. Take your money somewhere else. I'm done with it. I'd rather be around what I understand as real Christians.
Well, and this may be a bit of a reach as a comparison, but I think like even gigantic media companies like Disney and others are so concerned about what they will say that might offend the Chinese market, because so much of their money is coming from there that they're like censoring scripts. They're like changing scenes in movies. There are certain movies that one big movie star actually had to go on television and speak in Mandarin to apologize.
Oh, John Cena. I saw
Cena,
that. Yes,
that's right.
yeah,
exactly. John Cena, which was really interesting that he spoke Mandarin.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he had to act, but he actually had, well, the NBA did the
LeBron,
same thing.
Exactly.
And it sounds like, I mean, it's another expression of that kind of capitalist market pressure,
right,
in a maybe different way.
Yeah, no, it's true. The institution of the church is absolutely prone to the evils and the sins of the capitalist market, right? And I think that for decades we've been playing into it rather than being a source of I don't know what I'm trying to say. A strong pull on the other end. If you could see me, I'm making hand gestures.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, this isn't church, Pastor Dana. The visual aids are powerless against us. So, what's the alternative, though? I mean, how can you survive as a church? How do you put a new roof on that wonderful church downtown without those capitalist concerns?
Right. And there, I don't know that there is a good answer to that, or at least not one that people want to hear.
What would be the one that people wouldn't want to hear?
The answer that people don't want to hear is, I don't know. We have to wait for God to reveal that.
Okay.
Right, and people don't like that answer. I can give you my guess on what I envision moving forward, but it also doesn't buy in. I'm very anti-capitalist. I think that capitalism is the source of a lot of sin. There's a lot of wonderful things that come from capitalism. I don't want people to think that I'm like, but I am a little bit like, and I don't know what I'm trying to say.
How do you do that? I mean, how do you run any entity in the United States free of that sort of concern? I mean, because basically, I think the closest you can get is like the nonprofit sphere, and that's where churches reside anyway.
Right.
But you still have to pay for things, even as a nonprofit. I know that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if we want to continue to support capitalism as it is, I don't know that churches will survive.
Yeah. But even is there a collective sort of model that could fit the bill?
I mean, I don't know how this would work out, but I personally think that small local economies are the way to go.
Mm-hmm.
Where you end up being like having food sovereignty and like building things up yourself.
Sure.
But that's also, in our world market these days, that's also slightly unrealistic.
Well, and undermined at every opportunity,
right.
too, at every turn.
Right.
Exactly. Because I'm thinking when you first said, small economies, I'm going, well, here we are.
Right.
You know?
And that's one of the things that I've been working at as my role as pastor. I went into ministry because I want to form new communities of faith, not to go into previous existing ones.
Right.
So my specialty is like entrepreneurial ideas. So I'm constantly thinking of like things that I can do at church. And my dream is to have like a big piece of land where people live and there's like housing available that is somewhat rent controlled and gracious and compassionate. And we are sovereign with our food, and we're essentially self-sustaining, and we are engaged in the community. And I know that that's like a big dream and it's very idealistic, but I don't think that it's completely unrealistic either. It would just take a lot of work and a lot of shifting
and a lot of buy-in, and you'd have
right.
to convince a lot of other
right.
humans to do
right.
that too. And that's
and the thing that my superiors continue to say no to this idea about is because they're like, well, how is it going to be self-sustaining? How are you going to pay for it? And I'm like, because money, like, I hate money.
Yeah.
I wish money would just go away.
Well, so this leads me to a series of questions, very small topics. So is this absorption by, if not embrace of capitalism, is that part of why the institutional church is dying in the United States?
I think the institutional church could embrace capitalism and not die. I think what's been happening is that this is where my train of thought got lost earlier.
Oh, wow, that's great.
Hey, we're coming right back around.
That's impressive. I usually just lose them, and you found it again. Right on.
But so for so many decades, clergy have been, buying into and preaching from the pulpit this capitalist ideal of, finances and accruing wealth. And even if they're, the most generous and compassionate and kind-hearted of churches, they're still buying into the idea that we're passive recipients of the gospel, that, we need to, yes, we need to earn all we can, but we kind of threw out the window the concept of ethically earning all we can, right? Like we lost a few things along the way.
What's the difference? What are you talking about, ethically earning?
So John Wesley, our founder, one of his favorite sayings was, earn all you can, save all you can, and give all you can.
Okay.
So that's the thought process that I'm coming from first and foremost. And you can earn all you can by exploiting cheap labor in China and not pay the workers their fair dues. And you're making lots of money and fulfilling that commandment, quote unquote, by John Wesley to earn all you can. But you're not doing it very ethically. You're not treating people well by earning all you can. So when John Wesley said, earn all you can, it was earn all you can in an ethical way, when you're still treating people with compassion, you're still giving them fair, livable wages where they can provide for themselves, right? So I think that the church can survive in a capitalist environment, but we lost our way. We stopped caring about the ethics, and we let fear take hold of not having enough money to do what we feel called to do.
Well, and that leads me to my next question, which I believe I read in this piece, is that perhaps the institutional church dying is part of God's plan.
And there are scholars who have been saying that for the last 3 decades at least, because we've seen this decline. Younger people are continuing to not go back to church, when before we would see people leave church as they would exit high school and then come back when they had kids. And we're not seeing that as much anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I guess, without, I mean, I feel like I'm, trying to engage in discussion of things that is way beyond my pay grade. But, I mean, in the end, right, Jesus didn't have a physical church, right?
No, he didn't have a physical church. And what he was doing, what Jesus was doing, is he was revolutionizing Judaism. And that revolutionizing of Judaism and reinterpretation of Judaism is what we now, well, it became following the way of Jesus, and then Paul reinterpreted it to become Judaism or Christianity as we understand it.
Right.
Yeah, and I hate Hashimoto's. I really hate Hashimoto's. My thoughts just go right out the window.
All right, first off, I'll do it this time. You're tuned to KFUG LP Crescent City, 101.1 FM online, kfugradio.org. Yeah, it's your turn next. You get to do the legal ID next
Just do it right now. We should just keep doing it.
Just keep going. We'll get them all in, and then we don't have to do it for the rest of the hour. Right. We're talking with Pastor Dana Gill Port from the United Methodist Church here in Crescent City, specifically just kind of talking about everything that makes being a pastor difficult. And there are a lot of things that make it difficult that perhaps you and I don't think about. This is a big stupid question because I got thinking about history while you were talking just now with Mike and that last question. Is the fact of an institutional church maybe antithetical to the very precepts of Christianity to begin with?
Yeah. Potentially, because I mean, the institutional church has been buying into all of the wrong things. Like, we keep failing as an institution, right? Like, you think of the Catholic Church and reparations in the 1500s, when they were collecting money to pay for the saving of your souls, which is how Protestantism came to be. Is Martin Luther was like, this is wrong, we can't do this, and so a whole new tradition was born. And we keep stumbling, we keep hitting these human-made stumbling blocks, and yet God continues to invite us and call us home, and continues to invite us to do it right this time. And we continually fail. We take a few steps forward and then a lot of steps back, generally speaking. But I really do think that, we see this cycle of death and resurrection, getting back to the, is this part of God's plan, is letting the institution of the church die. We, as Christian people at least, we believe in a resurrected Christ, like a physical, bodily resurrection. And one of the beautiful things about that is that we recognize that death doesn't have the final say. And so when we think about the institution of the church dying, while it does instill fear in us, what should bring us a sense of peace and security is that we are a resurrection people, and that God resurrected Jesus. So why wouldn't God resurrect us in something new?
Yeah. What would that something new look like? I mean, any thoughts? I mean, you're dealing with the shortfalls and the shortcomings of the current situation every day. What situation would alleviate those? What would be getting back to the nugget of it to be for you?
I think part of it is getting back into community and conversation with one another. Like, the Trumpian politics has done a number on religion, like a huge number on religion, and has created this huge schism in our communities, even in our families and in our communities of faith, right? And oh God, losing my train of thought again. It's just become this war zone.
Right.
That may have to resolve itself before any progress can be made. Maybe.
Right. Well, and we need to start coming back to the table and having honest conversations with each other, rather than just being on social media and pointing fingers and being righteously indignant or unrighteously indignant Because, we are all going to have different ideas and values and ethics. Like, that's just the nature of humanity. I do believe that I am right most of the time. I will say that. But isn't that most people? Like, we all believe that. Yeah, otherwise we wouldn't believe it.
That's why I'm wondering, are those sorts of honest conversations possible?
They can be if you're willing to go into it and be changed, right? Like, if you go in just knowing that you're right. And it's a hard dance, right?
Yeah, no. That makes sense. What you're saying is going in willing to be changed. Yeah, I just don't know if anybody is in that. Are you in that position?
I am.
Really? Okay.
I will say, like, I'm not going to go into a conversation about the coronavirus and masking and
sure,
think like, okay, I'm going to have a conversation with this person who is not a scientist, and they will change. Like, that's not a conversation that will change me.
Right.
But also, I think part of it is recognizing the different expertise that each person brings and valuing that. So, like, I'm gonna listen to Anthony Fauci over the guy at the grocery store because of his expertise. But I would love to have a conversation with Dr. Fauci. A one-to-one.
Sure, but Fauci's not coming to your services. It's the guy in the grocery store. So, I mean, that seems like that's the challenge to me, and I'm not saying it's not.
Yeah.
I mean, you are, I'm sure, far better at this than I would be. but so that's where I come down. It's like, I don't want to hear from that guy.
Well,
right.
Because I'm not coming to it like, change me. I'm not doing that.
Well, I think, I think another part of it is and I'm not saying you personally, but almost anybody, and might have to risk being reviled.
Yeah.
Risk being hated by, for lack of a better phrase, speaking truth to power.
Oh man, you should have heard the amount of complaints and backlash I got when I refused to go back to in-person worship after we initially shut down in 2020. And then what's his face? I can't remember his name from the Trump administration announced that. Oh, it was Mike Pence that announced that pastors were essential workers, right?
Okay.
And a lot of people in my church thought that we would open up for in-person worship again immediately, and we didn't. I was like, we don't know enough about this virus. It's not safe. We're called to keep, especially those who are most vulnerable, safe. So we're not coming back for in-person worship yet. And people were so mad. And I think that really started like a little waterfall of effects.
And this is before Delta, right?
Yeah, this was just at the very beginning, March 2020.
How many parishioners have you lost?
15.
Oh my God.
Maybe 20.
Wow.
And we are not a huge congregation to begin with.
No. Man. Yeah, I had no idea it was that high. No idea. Oh my gosh.
So I have a question. So I think there are a few, maybe a couple, maybe one churches in this community that have robust congregations. And so I want to make it really clear, this is me saying this, okay? Because I've been thinking this the whole time we've been having this conversation, right? Is that a lot of this is the kind of theological conversation that is approaching religion from an adult perspective. Of nuance and kind of questioning even the core concepts of the religion itself, and should it even exist in its current form, right? And the vast majority of people in this country, their understanding of religion is what they learned as children.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I wonder, there's the whole prosperity gospel thing, where it's like, oh, come here and God will grace you and you'll have a Maserati and a private jet too.
If you give to us.
Only if you tithe and, enough. So there's that. But then there's also this theological component of the Christian church in America that says we will talk, We will give you a religion that matches your childish understanding of it.
Yeah, well, and I think that's
because that's what most people, like I said, most people's understanding of religion is what they learned in children
in Sunday school. And we don't, most of us don't evolve our biblical education beyond Sunday school.
I don't know, it's maybe it's part of the subtleties that you alluded to, but for me, I think I would assume that for most people of God, there's a difference between religion and church. The religion and church. Does that make sense? Is there a difference?
Well, I mean, yeah, because church is something that is lived out day to day, and religion is like the tradition and the practices
and the parts that don't change, the parts that aren't fungible.
Right.
Right.
Our communal prayers that we say out loud, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and over and above that, too, just, the precepts of Christianity in general, or Protestantism in general, and Christianity above that. It just, so, I mean, I guess, so getting back to, so are the good old days, for lack of a better term.
Give me that old time religion.
But even before that old time religion, is it just about, is it coming down? I guess I don't know. Would you like to see it? Would there be benefits from Christianity becoming what it was, say, in the first couple of generations, where it's
following the way of Jesus.
Following the way of Jesus, you're in the homes of other worshipers. It's a network that you put together. It's not a building with a roof that can fail.
There's a big push for a return to that.
Really,
and
wow.
I think that it's what that's called is house churches.
Okay.
And that's another big thing that's starting to pop up. Not only is it low capital.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah, low overhead.
Low overhead.
Ironically speaking.
Yeah. But it becomes more intimate. And that's what we've been missing. One of the big things we've been missing in churches as we understand them that like really boomed in the 50s is it became so there's a lack of intimacy and personality to it because you sit in the same pew every week and then you say goodbye and you go home and you might do something with a few church people during the week.
And you could get fellowship from a situation like that too, but
Right, but like at the beginning of when I first came here, I engaged my congregation in dialogue after my sermon. I gave that a good solid 6 months. And people left the church because of it. They were so uncomfortable talking to other people that they left. Wow. So when I say that intimacy has been lost in the last few decades, like it's really, we've forgotten in churches how to talk to each other. We've become just passive recipients of the gospel instead of active. Like, I think I asked my church by show of hands, who here identifies as a disciple of Christ, and 2 people raised their hand. And it's like, that was mind-blowing. That was a sobering moment for me. I was like, holy moly, these people don't identify as disciples of Christ. Self-identify as disciples of Christ. And that's a big thing, like, in my mind, when you get baptized, or if you were baptized as a baby and you get confirmed and you make that public proclamation, like, you're saying, I want to live the way Jesus did and live with the values that Jesus teaches. So when people were like, I'm not a disciple of Christ, I was like, okay, I have a lot of work to do.
Right. Wow.
Well, is another aspect of I keep saying the death of the institutional church. I don't know if I really mean to keep saying it that way, but
it's what it is.
It's what it is. Is that for so many churches, they don't engage the community in any broader way. I mean, we've had this conversation before, where I mean it just seems to me that if there was more active engagement of in the needs of the people outside of the walls of the church, that would actually make the church a more a place where people would want to come.
Yeah. And I think that hits the nail right on the head. Like, at least that's in alignment with my thoughts and values. And so many churches, and this is like a broad stroke generalization, so many churches and the people in the churches have become more concerned with saving souls, the one-time saving of the soul, than they are about living the way Jesus did and helping people and eating with the sinner and healing the sick and creating those miracles in his community, right? And when we start to put more value on saving an individual soul over saving an individual, I believe we've lost our way, because we can save souls and save people at the same time. It's not an either or.
Yeah, right. It shouldn't be an either or either, right? I mean, the whole idea is to be reborn and to relive your life in a different fashion.
Right. You're making that proclamation, like, I am reborn. All of my past errors are forgiven. I don't need to dwell on that anymore. I am going to start new and fresh, and I'm going to try my very best every day. That's what being a Christian is in my mind.
So I mean, is it much? So there's two different ways of, okay. So if church has become a place for people to go and passively receive, the word of God, and to sit there and to passively seek, salvation, in their pew, in their skin.
I come to church, I'm saved.
I'm here. Don't talk to me afterwards. Whatever. As opposed to that more ministerial sort of expression of religion that sounds like it's closer to your heart, right? Being out and being on the street corner and doing something. Is there a way, and I know maybe this is why you're here talking and why you posted what you did, is there a way, are you looking for a way to balance that? Are you looking for a way to integrate those two halves of the religious experience more? No. Okay.
Not really. I love saving souls. It is not my passion, right? I'm more what they call I have a diaconal heart.
Okay. What's that mean?
It means a deacon is someone who is a bridge between the church and the community, and is like hands-on involved in the community. And I love baptizing people, right? Like, that is a beautiful proclamation to me. It's a beautiful moment, and I love doing it, but it is not my main concern. My main concern is building the kingdom of God as I understand it.
Okay. What's that mean for you?
Building the kingdom of God is, we when we think of, when I say we, I want to say, I'm meaning the general thought process from the majority of people who were taught church things from the 50s, right? Like, so when you think of the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God, you think of after we die, we go to heaven, and heaven is this place where there's no suffering, there's no pain, everyone loves each other, and it's one big kumbaya moment. And I definitely think that is true. Heaven is absolutely a place where there's no pain and people get along, and it's a big kumbaya moment. I also think that Jesus didn't understand heaven in the same way that we now understand heaven. Jesus understood God's kingdom, both celestial after we die and here on earth. And so we need to create that environment where there is equity and no one suffers and no one goes hungry and no one is cold or no one is homeless, right? Like, that is building the kingdom, where we work towards a more just society, regardless of our differences.
Which comes first? Building the kingdom or saving the soul?
I think you save souls by building the kingdom.
Okay.
I don't think you can build a kingdom by saving souls.
Okay. All right. Can you have a congregation? Can you have a church that is engaged in the community the way that you envision without saving souls?
I think it depends on what you define as saving souls. Like someone who is a diehard like Baptist, where and I say Baptist because like they're known for their full immersion baptism as their version of saving souls.
Right.
This is not a dig at Baptists at all. I love Baptists. But dang it. What was I saying?
Can you have a congregation? Can you have an expression of your religion that engages the world and the community with your congregation, through your congregation, without saving their souls?
Oh, right. Thank you. And so, like, if you think of saving the souls as that baptismal moment where they confess Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior, I don't think you may save some souls, but you may not save as many as you want.
Okay.
But what I think of when I think of saving souls is not just that proclamation of I accept Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, but actually feeling in their body the acceptance of and that love that comes from Jesus, that comes from God, right? That comes from living out the way Jesus lived. And in living out those things, I believe that more people will be like, that's the way I want to live. And in that sense, we're saving souls, right? But they may not necessarily be like, Jesus Christ, like, because that language is somewhat outdated for some people. Like, it feels foreign and weird and awkward to them.
What saving of souls? Or what? What's
Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior.
Okay.
Right? Like, some people are just like, that just feels weird to me. And, but if we are, having a weekly safe space where LGBTQIA plus folks can come and just be, that's living out the way Jesus would. And I have people who are coming because they agree with the values that we're living out.
Yeah, for me, and I realize this is my agenda, so I'm clear on it, I think.
Gospel according to Mike.
Well, because I believe in like liberation theology, right? I mean that because then the church is an active, ideally powerful partner in achieving temporal, social, and economic justice, right? And I was in El Salvador, different country, different culture. I get it, but one church, the church I was at on a Sunday, had been given a special dispensation to be open that day because they had some baptism things or something that they had already pre-scheduled, because everybody else was at the big municipal stadium in San Salvador, right? Because some big wigs from Rome were there and all of the hoi polloi were there, and that was the big church service for the city, if not the country, that day. And the youngish priest at this place I was at, I mean, he just like lit into this thing of going, oh, so where are all of those people at today? Well, they're over there in their finery, and they're doing this and they're doing that, and it was just this thing of, we here, this church, this clergy, we're not with them. Yeah. We're with you.
Yeah.
And we're with you in the sense of not only saving souls, but also how do we help with improving the material conditions of your daily life?
Right.
You know what I mean? And I think that's the kind of thing that I think could re-energize the institutional church in this country, because you can see it where it's energized by prosperity gospel. Those people are going there because, I'll get rich if I do this. Where it's energized by, pro-military Jesus and pro-hate everybody that we tell you it's appropriate to hate. That's really energized. A lot of the churches that aren't either of those things don't have that energizing principle, which for me would be a liberation theology kind of model. Yeah. I don't know, but that's my agenda.
Liberation theology.
I could never be a preacher.
It seems to me that, man, you've got a really hard job.
Yeah. I think most people are like, you're a pastor, you preach on Sundays, that's it, right?
Yeah, no. From having to balance like interior and exterior concerns, spiritual concerns, leaky roof, all of that stuff. And that's just, wow.
Yeah. Like, I make all of the slides for Sunday. I make the bulletins.
Oh my gosh.
I create.
So what would you like to have happen? What would make this better for you, just as a proletarian worker?
Oh man, if people like got excited about the ministry that we're doing and just wanted to start volunteering their time, like if someone wanted to make a slide once a week for the worship service, oh god, that would be like the best thing in the world.
No, I get you. I get you. I do. And for a lot of time until Mike and Persephone and kind of got together, and Redwood Voice and the volunteers and everything sort of, it's
a lot
I
of
feel
work.
you. Yep, and it's hard. Always, it was very difficult for me. I can't imagine. I have no idea what kind of person you are, but you're a person of God, so that gives me some sort of inkling. But yeah, there are just days where I just don't want to do it. I didn't want to just know, and on days I didn't. And, I could get away with that. I didn't have a congregation waiting for me. I didn't have something. So it was like, it's difficult. Wow.
It's not looked upon very highly if the pastor doesn't show up to church on Sunday.
Independent study today.
Yeah.
Is what we're doing. So, obviously, so not having a physical church to worry about, or having that be somebody else's worry would be good for you, right?
Yeah.
And I don't want to set you up like this is just Pastor Dana like complaining hour and this is how my life sucks. Not at all. It's really interesting what you've laid out and the myriad concerns that you have to balance, from the completely spiritual and abstract to the very nuts and bolts concrete. And it's daunting.
Some of it is like we've talked about. As much as I hate it, it's financial need. So, people are like, I think y'all are doing some really great work. Like, we could use some donations because we have a leaky roof and it just keeps getting leakier. I would also like to just tear that whole annex down and start over.
Right.
That's my ultimate dream, but I don't think that would ever.
Keep the stone church.
Yeah, I want to keep the sanctuary, but the annex,
and
the annex is what's leaky. That would be my dream.
You see, now I start thinking like nuts and bolts. Like, why couldn't you do that?
Because I have a board of trustees that I have to go through.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah. And then everything on top of that. I mentioned you have to go up to UMC big time, right? That's it.
I've got my local church board that I have to go through, and then I also have my higher ups that I have to go to. So is it just a matter of being, of having that storefront church that you want, where you get dedicated people who come in and are involved, and maybe costs aren't so much, and having to hold up the material church on your shoulders might not be so big a deal? I think that could be part of it, or I feel like I just keep saying this, like, people who are excited and don't know that this kind of progressive church exists here in Del Norte. Like, we're here.
And very much out of the ordinary.
Yeah, I didn't realize that when I first moved here.
You thought you'd be hanging out with other young radical people of God? Is that what you thought?
I did. Like, I thought it was going to be like seminary, where I was going to be around like-minded people and it was going to be easy peasy. No.
We're
sorry.
North.
Yes, yeah, right.
Oh man, I thought that I was going to San Francisco for urban ministry, and then my bishop appointed me here.
Oh wow!
It was the biggest culture shock.
Whoa,
I've ever
that's
experienced.
a 180-degree. Oh my God!
So I know this is.
Wow.
I know you've got to get out of here pretty soon, so it's probably not a discussion to have now, but maybe at some point. Now St. Timothy's in Brookings. They're Episcopal, right?
They are.
They are. So it's a different kind of a thing, but
they're amazing.
They are amazing. That's the kind of, for me, that's the kind of church I would want to be affiliated with, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And can something like that even happen here?
It could, but it would take more people wanting to be a part of that institution, right?
I think maybe you'd also have to have more people wanting more people being jerks. I think you'd need to have like maybe a more affluent sort of situation going on here.
Have an awful city council
and more NIMBYism.
That restricts how often you can feed the homeless.
Right. Yeah. Things like, I think you also need to have that part of it. To get that kind of buy-in from the community.
I realize this is a bit over the top, but heard it more than once. There's nothing better for religion than a good, healthy devil.
Right? Yeah.
It's
Exactly.
true.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
It's nothing rallies communities of faith like a good, solid opponent.
So what I see in this community, and I think you're saying the same sort of thing, is just a lot of apathy, just a bunch of atomic people going about their lives, and not a lot of community other than just the bare minimum.
Right. And in general, I see a lot of people who are Christian because that's what they were raised with, and if you go to church and the sermon and the pastor says you're still a good Christian because you showed up today, you're doing well. Yeah. They say, "Yippee, I'm
You've
good.
Heard what you want. Yeah.
I can do whatever I want."
Right. And I can get out of here in time for the playoffs.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And.
I'm sorry, that would be a concern.
That would be a concern for me. I mean, I have to be honest about it.
When I changed worship to 12:30, I got so many complaints. And I was like, this is the Lord's day. You give this day to the Lord. Are you kidding? Not to football.
That's try to go up against football.
I know,
that's
it's a
too
losing
healthy a
battle. It's a
devil.
losing battle.
That's the way John Madden died. All right. Anyway, it's 11:28. You're tuned to KFUG Community Radio. We've got Pastor Dana Gill Port in the studio live, just talking about being a pastor. So what's and however long you want to keep this going. I know you've got a meeting to get to, and we talked about it being an hour, and we're closing in on that. We haven't even touched on the homeless stuff.
Oh yeah. Do you want to touch on it real quick?
Let's touch on the homeless stuff.
Just to let you know, it's 11:29.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's okay.
Yeah. So. Where are we? I remember you had a group, kind of a focus group, a community-based focus group, and a couple of meetings, and then pandemic. What's happened since?
We continued to meet virtually. Okay. We had our first meeting, and then the pandemic hit, and so the group shrank once the pandemic hit. Because
that group, first off, I was at one of those meetings. That was very impressive. You had everybody in the community with
there were
buy-in.
over 30 people at that meeting. It was amazing. But man, it kind of like fizzled out a little bit. Not entirely, because we still had a really good core group, but we didn't have the breadth of community input that we wanted. We made it work, and here we are 2 years later. We have gone through a whole gamut of ideas and proposals, and looking for funding for certain things, and working with the city council and the board supervisors. And fortunately, we've made a name enough for ourselves with the local officials that they trust us, and at least it seems to me that they value our opinion. And so we're making really good headway, and we're doing a lot of good work with Department of Health and Human Services. We are working to support Del Norte Mission Possible with some grant writing to expand their emergency shelter. I don't know. We haven't had a check-in yet, so I don't know how that's going. We're meeting with developers to build affordable housing here in the community, as well as permanent supportive housing for people who struggle with mental health needs and just need that permanent support, right? Because the Legacy, which is the old penny saver that is run by Department of Health and Human Services, is just, there's a wait list for it that's far too long. So we clearly need more permanent supportive housing. And then we also need transitional housing for people who are going from emergency shelter to either permanent housing or permanent supportive housing. And we have an idea ready. It's not quite the right time for that idea. So we're looking, there's so much funding coming in through federal and state services for housing and homelessness. So we're doing a lot of work to try and access those funds. And we have land in spades here.
Right.
It's one of the things that urban cities, they're like, we don't have any land. We've got money, but no land. And we're like, we have no money, but we have land.
It seems like eminently doable here.
It's very doable here. We need to get the developers up. And that is the biggest challenge, is getting the developers up, making it worth their while, and getting the county and the city to cooperate. And then after all of that is said and done, we have to deal with NIMBYism.
Right.
And that's one of the main things that I work on in the pulpit, at least with my community, is, you can't in my opinion, you cannot call yourself a Christian and then say, yeah, they need a home, just not right next door to me.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Well, and where there's the political will, there's the way. I mean, they turned that motel into first emergency housing and now permanent supportive housing. It's dead in the middle of town.
Yeah.
So if there's political will on behalf of the county and the city, it can happen because they'll push it through. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and we have we do have a meeting next Monday for updates. So I'll use this moment to announce that if anyone does want to come to this meeting, it's on Zoom. Feel free to email me at crescentcityumc@gmail.com. And you're more than welcome. I'll send you the Zoom invite to come to this updated.
Is Facebook a good way to get a hold of you too?
Facebook is a great way. Yeah,
Okay,
Crescent City United Methodist Church.
Cool.
Yeah.
Pastor Dana Gill Port, is there anything that you wanted to address and wanted to get out there that we haven't gotten around to?
The last thing, and I briefly mentioned it in passing, I don't think I directly mentioned it, is we have every Friday night safe space from 6 to 9 or 10. It's either 9 or 10. I can't remember.
And we'll play that PSA here as soon as we're done. Actually, I got that all lined up.
There you go. So it's every Friday night, and it's
ours says Saturday too.
Does it really? Yeah, we need to re-record that one. We used to do Friday and Saturday, and there just wasn't enough.
How's that going? People showing up? You said
there are people showing up.
Good.
Sometimes no one shows up, and it's just there's one family that runs it. So I'm usually not present because I want people there to know that we are not going to be evangelizing to them. Like this is not an evangelism time. I'm not here to save your soul.
You're not bringing them to proselytize.
Right. It's strictly a safe space, so I very intentionally stay away. But I do know that we have 2 youths that have been coming somewhat regularly.
Good.
And, if we're providing that space for 2 youths to feel fully accepted and at home as they are, that's a success in my book.
Yeah.
So if you need a safe space, or if you are just questioning and trying to figure out who you are and how you identify, Friday nights at Crescent City United Methodist Church, we're here for you.
Okay, we've got that. We've got the homeless group meeting on Monday. That's a week from today. At what time?
5:30.
5:30. And then every Sunday, of course, services. First off, you can hear if you wanted to do your homework, you've got the previous week's service. And only an hour. If they go over an hour, it gets cut off at the end.
So sometimes you guys don't hear like the Lord's Supper and
radio time is like because we've got something happens right after.
Sorry, sometimes my sermons are just too long-winded.
I have gone into it to get the sermon. So like at the very least, that's our goal, is to make sure we get the sermon in that hour and then as much of the other service as possible. But the previous week you can hear on KFUG Sundays at 11. And then you can just go down and enjoy the current week's service at 12:30, correct? 12:30.
That's right.
What's the address down there, too, on each street?
664 H Street.
Neighbor of the Beast, huh? Okay.
Beast adjacent.
And we always sing hymn number 666.
Right.
Shalom. I know. It's the worst. It's the worst ending hymnal number.
Well, Pastor Dana, thank you so very much. Mike, you have anything else you want to ask?
No, just thanks for coming in, and hopefully we'll have you back soon.
Yeah, I'd love to.
I'd like to do more maybe after the meeting this next week. Maybe we can do something. We focus just on the homeless issue and talk about what's happening, what's going on with that.
Maybe we could have our young reporters.
There you go.
Up on that.
I forget we have a set of those now, don't we?
Nice.
Pastor Dana Gill Port from the United Methodist Church here in Crescent City. Thanks for coming in today. And you are tuned to KFUG Community Radio, 1136 The Time.
Are you looking for a safe space to just be? An excuse to get out of the house? Something to mix it up in this lonely tiny town? The United Methodist Church of Crescent City is now offering a safe space 2 nights a week, Friday and Saturday, 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Come and have conversations, hang out on the lawn, or read a book. Be as engaged or introverted as you prefer, so long as this remains a safe space for all. Masks and social distancing required when indoors, regardless of vaccination status. Masks encouraged outdoors. Faith not required or expected. A purely non-denominational event. If you have any questions, please contact Tay at 406-475-4666.